Draw a straight line from Moscow to New York, and it slices right across Greenland, the shortest path for nuclear bombers and ballistic missiles. Now, as the United States, Russia, and China all circle this frozen island, Washington's military option is suddenly on the table. Why would three superpowers risk a collision for a place most people never think about? The answer reveals why Greenland could decide the next war, and nothing about the world's power balance will look the same once you see what is happening behind the scenes. Official talks between the United States, Denmark, and Greenland collapsed in Washington after just one round. President Trump, speaking from the White House, made no effort to soften his position. He said control of Greenland was so strategic right now, and he insisted he would secure it one way or another. When pressed, a White House spokesperson confirmed that using the United States military is always an option. The phrase echoed through European capitals, setting off alarm bells across NATO. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen stepped before cameras in Copenhagen with a stark warning. He told reporters that the president wants to conquer Greenland. His words landed like a thunderclap, shattering decades of careful diplomacy between Washington and Copenhagen. Greenland's own leaders backed Denmark, repeating that their island was not for sale and would not be transferred by force or treaty. Behind closed doors, the Danish delegation described the United States' stance as a fundamental disagreement. The phrase quickly filtered into press coverage, signaling that the usual channels of compromise had broken down. For the first time since the Cold War, the alliance itself seemed to be under strain, this time not from Moscow, but from Washington. As statements hardened on both sides, the rift moved from private negotiation to public confrontation, with the world watching for what would come next. European military aircraft touched down at Nuuk's modest runway in the gray light of January. French, German, Swedish, and Norwegian troops stepped onto Greenlandic soil, forming the core of Operation Arctic Endurance. Their mission was to show the flag, reassure Denmark, and deter any sudden moves from Washington. But the geography of Greenland is unforgiving. Nuuk, the capital, sits at the island's southern tip, over 1,800 kilometers from Pituffik Space Base, where the real military buildup was underway. The European deployment, hundreds strong, found themselves guarding government offices, harbors, and airfields far from the radar domes and runways that anchor the U.S. presence in the Arctic North. Commanders in Nuuk pored over maps, weighing logistics against the vast emptiness between their position and the U.S. base. Supply lines stretched thin over ice and rock. Reinforcements would take days, not hours, to reach the far side of the island. Meanwhile, Pentagon planners pressed ahead with a multi-million-dollar expansion at Pituffik, extending the runway for heavy transports, breaking ground on a deep-water port for icebreakers, and doubling barracks capacity. About 200 American personnel rotated in and out, supported by contractors and Danish liaisons, as construction crews worked around the clock. At sea, a U.S. carrier strike group shifted course toward the Middle East, signaling that American forces remained globally mobile, even as attention fixed on the Arctic. Military alerts rippled across the Americas, while European allies realized their rapid reaction units were deployed closer to political symbols than to the true strategic prize. The mismatch on the ground laid bare the operational stakes. In Greenland, distance is as decisive as firepower. Pituffik Space Base sits on Greenland's northwest coast, just 950 kilometers from the North Pole. Here, inside a cluster of domes and antenna fields, United States Space Force technicians monitor the sky for the faintest trace of a missile launch. The base's phased array radar can detect a Russian intercontinental ballistic missile within seconds of ignition, transmitting alerts to NORAD before the missile even clears the Arctic horizon. In the event of a launch from Russia's Kola Peninsula, the warning time for New York or Washington is measured in minutes. Every second gained at Pituffik can mean thousands of lives saved. The Pentagon has poured hundreds of millions of dollars into upgrades, including a newly extended runway to handle heavy transports, deep-water port construction for resupply ships and icebreakers, and expanded barracks to support round-the-clock operations. Network operations centers now link Pituffik sensors to a global web of satellites and ground stations, feeding real-time data to command posts across North America. The United States calls this the first layer of its Golden Dome, a continental shield inspired by Israel's Iron Dome, but scaled for the entire Northern Hemisphere. while the Golden Dome system itself remains mostly on paper. Pituffik's early warning role is already critical, giving the United States a technical edge no rival can match in the Arctic. Russian naval planners have watched the Arctic thaw with a different set of calculations. Over the last decade, Moscow has reactivated more than 40 Soviet-era bases north of the Arctic Circle, stretching from the Kola Peninsula to the Bering Strait. These outposts, once neglected, now bristle with new radars, airstrips, and hardened shelters. The Russian Northern Fleet, operating from Murmansk, deploys the country's largest concentration of submarines, many armed with nuclear missiles, routinely slipping beneath the ice to approach the Giuk Gap, the narrow corridor between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. Each passage is a test of NATO's vigilance, and a reminder that the shortest route for a missile launched from a submarine to reach North America runs just west of Greenland. Russia's icebreaker fleet dwarfs every rival. More than 40 vessels, including nuclear-powered giants, keep the Northern Sea Route open year-round and escort both military and commercial ships through waters that remain frozen half the year. In contrast, the United States operates just 2 heavy icebreakers. On land, new Arctic brigades train for combat in extreme cold, supported by S-400 air defense systems positioned to shield the northern coastline and key bases. These deployments are not just for show. In recent years, Russian bombers have flown mock attack runs over the Barents Sea and the Norwegian Sea, probing NATO response times. Each move signals that Russia sees the Arctic as both a shield and a springboard, a place where control of the sea and the sky could tip the balance in any future conflict. Arctic shipping lanes are rewriting the rules of global trade. As sea ice recedes, the Northern Sea route along Russia's coast cuts the journey between Asia and Europe by up to 40% compared to the Suez Canal. For shipping giants and maritime economists, that is not just a shortcut, it is a tectonic shift. A container ship traveling from Shanghai to Rotterdam can shave nearly 2 weeks off its voyage, saving millions in fuel and labor costs. But the route comes with strings attached. Russia claims regulatory control, charging fees for passage and requiring icebreaker escorts through its waters. Each transit is logged, taxed, and watched. These new Arctic corridors are more than commercial highways. Whoever sets the rules for access and security gains control over the flow of trillions in annual trade. Greenland's position at the crossroads, near the Giuk Gap, the Northwest Passage, and the Atlantic gateways, gives it leverage over future shipping patterns. As the world's major economies eye these routes, the contest for Greenland is not just about minerals or missile defense. It is about who gets to decide the terms of Arctic commerce and who gets left waiting at the dock. Greenland's minerals have become a rallying cry in Washington and Beijing. On paper, the island holds 39 of the 50 minerals the US government lists as critical for national security. These elements power everything from fighter jet guidance systems to missile electronics. But surveys by economic advisors point to a stubborn reality. The ore is there, but turning it into usable supply is a marathon, not a sprint. Arctic conditions, a lack of roads, and the absence of deepwater ports mean any large-scale mining project faces a timeline of at least a decade before production. The promise is real, but so are the obstacles. Chinese interests have already found a foothold in Greenland's mining sector. Shanghai Resources, a Beijing-backed company, holds a major stake in the Kvanefjeld rare earth project, one of the island's largest. Past attempts by Chinese firms to buy airports and a naval station were blocked after pressure from Denmark and the United States. Yet the economic reality remains stark. Greenland's minister warned that without Western investment, they will turn to China. The path forward splits into 3 scenarios. 1. A rapid military push by the United States. 2. A quiet drift toward Chinese economic influence. 3. A drawn-out contest where global powers circle while Greenland weighs its options. Greenland isn't just a frozen frontier, it is now the pivot of global power. As Arctic ice recedes and militaries advance, every new runway or radar shifts the balance. The world's next conflict could hinge on who claims the silence between the ice. What happens here won't stay here.